If someone asked you, when was the country we now know as the United States first settled, what would you answer? Would you say 1776, for the Declaration of Independence and the American Revolution? Would you say 1620, for Plymouth Colony and the Mayflower Pilgrims? Would you say 1614, for New Netherland and the Dutch East India Company? Or would you say 1607, for Jamestown, Virginia? Or how about 1585, for the English colony on Roanoke Island that mysteriously disappeared within a few years? Would you go all the way back to 14,000 BC, when the first Americans may have walked across the land bridge from Siberia to Alaska to central North America? Or how about 15,000 to 35,000 BC, when the first Americans may have sailed along the south coast of Alaska and down the west coast of Canada? The main question and some of the results are described in the book Lies My Teacher Told Me: Everything Your American History Textbook Got Wrong, by the late Professor James Loewen of the University of Vermont. Unfortunately, he did not like the answer he got. Let's see what he wrote, and I'll add my comments as we go. Chapter 3 starts with, Over the last few years, I have asked hundreds of college students, when was the country we now know as the United States first settled? This is a generous way of phrasing the question. Surely we now know as implies that the original settlement antedated the founding of the United States. I initially believed, certainly I had hoped, that the students would suggest 30,000 BC or some other pre-Columbian date. They did not. Their consensus answer was 1620. Score for the Mayflower Pilgrims. Obviously, my students' heads had been filled with America's origin myth, the story of the first Thanksgiving. Textbooks are among the retailers of this primal legend. Part of the problem is the word settle. Settlers were white, a student once pointed out to me. Indians didn't settle. Students are not the only people misled by settle. The film that introduces visitors to Plymouth Plantation, now renamed to Plymouth Patuxent, tells how they went about the work of civilizing a hostile wilderness. One Thanksgiving weekend, I listened as a guide at the Statue of Liberty talked about European immigrants populating a wild East Coast. As we shall see, however, if American Indians hadn't already settled New England, Europeans would have had a much tougher job of it. Sadly, this is very true. Much of the New England coast had already been cleared for farming, but then depopulated by a plague brought by fishermen from Europe, leaving empty villages and cleared fields for the new arrivals to take advantage of. Starting the story of America's settlement with the Pilgrims leaves out not only American Indians, but also the Spanish and the African slaves left in South Carolina in 1526 by Spaniards who abandoned a settlement attempt. Professor Loewen went on to blame the students' ignorance on the white Anglo-Saxon Protestants who, he assumed, wrote most of the school textbooks. He even reviews the authors' names to look for non-English surnames, which makes a lot of assumptions about race that would take a whole other video to dissect. Beginning the story in 1620 also omits the Dutch, who were living in what is now Albany by 1614. Instead, should English be required for proper settling, 1620 is not even the date of the first permanent English settlement. For in 1607, the London Company sent settlers to Jamestown, Virginia. No matter, the mythic origin of the country we now know as the United States is at Plymouth Rock, and the year is 1620. Some of these items are matters of omission from the textbooks, such as the Jamestown colony predating the Plymouth colony. Other topics left out include the depopulation of the Northeast by plague before the Pilgrims even arrived. But now we should ask, how many of these topics need to be included in a textbook with limited space and limited time in the classroom? Anyone who takes the time to read more history will quickly learn plenty about it. Professor Loewen's goals include proving that school textbooks often misrepresent history, so let's get back to the original question. When was the country we now know as the United States first settled? In my opinion, this is a vague question, and we can easily explain why the answer 1620 is not too far from the truth. It comes down to how we interpret the word country. Do you mean the geographic location or the political entity? This is not a trivial distinction, and I don't blame the students for thinking he meant the political entity. A clearer question would have been, when was the land now governed by the United States first settled? Instead, the word country can easily imply the earliest settlements of the political entity, which got its start on the east coast of North America. The first Americans did arrive tens of thousands of years before the Europeans. They were there for the origin of the United States, but they were not the driving force that formed the governments of the original 13 British colonies. The same goes for Spanish forts and missions, which were eventually taken by the United States, but were not part of the original settlements. The original colonies were very English by nature because they belonged to England. France and Spain were rival powers, to the point that European wars were fought against them by the English in North America. If you look at the founding documents of the United States, you'll find the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and the Bill of Rights, all of which are very Eurocentric because the early United States was Eurocentric. So back to the original question. If we're looking for early settlements that helped originate the United States of America, we should recognize that Jamestown was settled 13 years before Plymouth. If instead you want to know when and where the first human settlements developed in North America, the answer probably lies with the native Alaskans from 15 to 35,000 years ago. We should not minimize the contribution of the Native Americans, Spanish, and French to the country we know today, especially the Native Americans, who fought with and against the settlers in every major conflict in North America. For example, according to the website for the Museum of the American Revolution, though their stories are not often told, Native Americans played major roles in the Revolutionary War. Supporting both armies as scouts, soldiers, and diplomats, the contributions of Native Americans were critical to many important events, battles, and decisions that shaped the outcome of the war. But remember, these groups were allies or adversaries of the newly developing country, not part of its government. The 13 colonies were modeled after and owed allegiance to England. And that's who they had to fight to gain independence and become the United States of America. So in my opinion, the final answer to the original question is 1607, for the first successful settlement that evolved into, and was not just taken over by, the emerging United States of America. Jamestown gets the win. What do you think, and what was your original answer to the question? Let us know in the comments. Thank you for watching. Please like this video, subscribe to this channel for new videos every week or two, and see the description below for a list of books and online resources featured in this video.